My name is Evelyn Lakewood, and I never thought the woman I called my best friend would steal my husband right out from under me. But betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from family, and hers nearly destroyed me. The first time I saw her again after 4 years, she didn't recognize me at first. She walked into the ballroom, heels clicking against marble, her laughter pitched too high. The kind of laugh that demanded attention. A fresh diamond glittered on her finger, her new husband trailing behind her like a prize she had won. She looked smug, untouchable. That was the face of my ex-best friend, Clarissa Hale, the woman who had stolen my husband and flaunted it like a crown. But when her eyes finally landed on me, her laughter stopped mid-air. She froze. I saw the color drain from her face like someone had just pulled a plug. Her glass of champagne trembled, the liquid spilling onto her hand, and in that single delicious second, I knew my patience had been worth every damn day of silence. I smiled slowly, the kind of smile that makes people lean in closer, even when they know they should back away. "Clarissa," I said, my voice carrying easily across the crowded room. Heads turned. Conversations paused. The sound of her name in my mouth was enough to slice through the music and chatter like a knife. She swallowed hard and pasted on that fake socialite grin she'd perfected. "Evelyn," she said, each syllable trembling as if she'd just seen a ghost. No one else in the room knew the history between us. To them, it was just 2 women greeting each other at a charity gala. But Clarissa knew. She remembered the night she betrayed me. She remembered every cruel word she whispered while wrapped in my husband's arms. And now she was standing face to face with the woman she thought she had destroyed. Her eyes darted past me. And then she saw him, the man standing at my side. He rested one hand on the small of my back with effortless authority, the gesture both protective and possessive. His presence was impossible to ignore, tall, broad-shouldered, his tailored suit cut sharp enough to draw blood. The kind of man who owned every room he stepped into. And when Clarissa's gaze locked onto him, her painted smile faltered. "Darling," he said to me, his voice smooth, rich, dangerous. "Introduce me to your friend." The pause before friend was deliberate, calculated. It was a blade wrapped in velvet. Clarissa blinked rapidly, her lips parting in disbelief. She tried to steady herself, but her knees betrayed her. She stumbled, grabbing the edge of a nearby table. Her husband, the one she'd stolen from me, was across the room, oblivious, laughing too loudly at some joke he barely understood. He didn't notice her unraveling. But I did. Every second of it. "This is Clarissa Hale," I said, my tone light, almost casual, though my eyes burned with every ounce of venom I'd stored for years. "We used to be close." Clarissa's throat bobbed as she forced a laugh. "Yes, very close," she managed. "Old friends." Her voice cracked on the last word. The man beside me extended his hand, slow and deliberate. "Nicholas Blackwood," he said, his grip firm as she reluctantly placed her trembling hand in his. "Evelyn's husband." There it was. The blow. A silent explosion behind her eyes. Her mouth opened, then shut again, her perfect red lipstick suddenly looking garish against her pale skin. Nicholas didn't let her go quickly. He held her hand a beat too long, his eyes drilling into her, his smile just sharp enough to be cruel. And then softly, only for her, "I've heard so much about you." Clarissa flinched. I saw it. A tiny, involuntary twitch at the corner of her eye. The people around us kept chatting, sipping their drinks, clinking glasses, oblivious to the fact that Clarissa Hale had just been gutted in silence. I leaned in, my lips close to her ear, my perfume suffocating her as I whispered, "You look surprised." When I pulled back, her mask was cracking. She was trying to recover, but the panic was in her eyes. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. For 4 years, she had strutted around Chicago like she'd won. My husband on her arm, my life stolen, my dignity shattered. She thought she buried me. But tonight, in front of the city's elite, her empire began to crumble with a single name. Mine. The orchestra struck up a new song, violins swelling like a storm gathering. Clarissa's glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Heads turned. Her husband looked over at last, irritation flashing across his face. She bent quickly, fumbling to gather the shards, but Nicholas stopped her with a hand hovering just above her wrist. Not touching, but close enough to command. "Careful," he murmured, his voice low and laced with authority. "You don't want to cut yourself." The humiliation was public now. She straightened, her cheeks burning, her breathing shallow. Every instinct in her screamed to leave, but her pride wouldn't let her. Not yet. I tilted my head, watching her. "Don't worry, Clarissa," I said sweetly. "We'll have plenty of time to catch up." The way her eyes widened told me she heard what I wasn't saying. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a reckoning. And the night was only beginning. 4 years earlier, before the betrayal, my life looked like everything I had ever wanted. Chicago in the fall was alive with gold leaves and brisk air, and our brownstone on Astor Street felt like the center of my world. My husband, Daniel, was charming in that effortless way people admired. He worked in finance, the kind of job that came with late nights but also fine dinners, trips to the lake, and a sense of stability I had clung to since we married in my 20s. And then there was Clarissa, my best friend since college. She wasn't just a fixture in my life. She was woven into every part of it. She helped plan my wedding. She babysat our niece. She spent countless weekends sprawled across our couch with a glass of wine in hand, gossiping about work or the newest restaurant we had to try. She wasn't family by blood, but she was the kind of friend you let into your home without makeup on, hair undone, your guard down. People used to joke that she was our third wheel, but I brushed it off. I believed we were all adults. I believed trust was the foundation of everything. Clarissa had a way of commanding attention. She was beautiful in a loud, magnetic way. Raven hair, sharp cheekbones, the kind of smile that hinted at secrets. She thrived on being seen. I was the steady one, the listener, the one who held her hair back after too many martinis and reminded her she deserved more than the men who broke her heart. Daniel used to tease that I was her therapist, not her friend. I laughed then. Now I know better. Looking back, the red flags were there. Little things that didn't register at the time. The way she'd linger too long when Daniel poured her wine. The casual touches, a hand on his arm, a playful shove when he told a joke. Once, at a holiday party, I caught her watching him across the room, her eyes sharp and calculating, before she noticed me and broke into a laugh, dragging me into some harmless conversation. I brushed it off, because that's what you do with people you trust. You explain away what your gut tries to tell you. Our routines were steady. Mornings with black coffee in the kitchen, Daniel reading the Tribune while I flipped through emails. Evenings cooking together, or me cooking while he called out stock tips from the other room. Weekends we'd meet Clarissa for brunch, the three of us crowded into a booth, mimosas flowing. She always ordered pancakes, extra syrup, then complained she'd ruined her diet, only to laugh when Daniel teased her about it. I told myself this was normal. Friendship, comfort, the blending of lives. But cracks show before foundations collapse. I remember one evening, a bitterly cold February night, the three of us huddled in our living room. Snow piled against the windows, the fire roaring. Daniel had opened a bottle of red wine, and Clarissa was curled up under one of my blankets, my blanket, stretched out across the couch like she owned it. She and Daniel were arguing about some sports game, voices animated, laughter bouncing back and forth between them. I sat in the armchair across from them, my book unopened on my lap, and for the first time, I felt like the outsider. Like they were the show, and I was just the audience. "Don't pout, Evelyn," Clarissa said suddenly, turning her sharp grin on me. "We know you secretly love it when we fight." Her tone was teasing, but something in her eyes lingered. Something mocking. Daniel laughed, shaking his head, oblivious. But the comment left a sour taste in my mouth. That night, when she finally left, Daniel kissed my cheek absently and headed upstairs. I lingered in the living room, staring at the blanket she'd left behind, the faint trace of her perfume clinging to it. It smelled like victory, and I hated myself for even thinking that. Life went on. Months blurred. Clarissa started dropping by unannounced more often, with excuses that sounded harmless enough. I was in the neighborhood, or I had a terrible date and just needed wine and company. Daniel never complained. If anything, he seemed amused by her dramatics, indulgent of her chaos. And I convinced myself this was loyalty, friendship, that I was lucky to have two people who cared about me so much. The last clear memory I have before everything shattered was a summer afternoon on the terrace. The city buzzed below, cicadas humming in the trees, the air thick with heat. We'd just finished lunch, and I went inside to grab dessert. I was gone maybe 3 minutes. When I stepped back outside, plates in hand, I caught a glimpse of them. Daniel leaning in closer than necessary to say something, Clarissa laughing, her hand brushing his knee. It was a flash, a moment, gone before I could register it. By the time I set the plates down, they were sitting apart again. Perfectly casual, perfectly innocent. Clarissa looked at me, her eyes bright, too bright, and said, "You really are lucky, Evelyn. Men like Daniel don't come around often." I smiled then. Tight. Automatic. But deep in my stomach, something shifted. It was the first real red flag, and I ignored it. Because when you've built your life on trust, betrayal isn't just unthinkable, it's invisible. Until it hits you like a blade. It happened on a Tuesday night, the kind of night you expect nothing from. Daniel had said he was working late again, buried in reports for some client. I didn't question it. Why would I? He'd always been ambitious, and I had built my life on the comfort of trust. I poured myself a glass of wine, curled on the couch, and scrolled aimlessly through emails until I saw the notification. It was from a mutual friend, a woman who never messaged me directly. "Are you okay?" That was all it said. 2 words that didn't make sense until the photo attached loaded. I stared at it, blinking hard as though the pixels would rearrange themselves. Daniel and Clarissa, in a restaurant I didn't recognize, leaning across the table toward each other, his hand on hers, her lips parted in that familiar laugh. But the angle of the shot told me everything. It wasn't 2 friends sharing dinner. It was intimacy. It was ownership. My chest went tight. I wanted to throw the phone, but I couldn't look away. The caption the friend had added burned worse than the photo itself. "I thought you knew." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't breathe right either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her hand on his. Her smug smile, the casual way she looked at the man who once swore I was his forever. My mind replayed every brunch, every laugh, every night she stayed too late. And suddenly, all those small red flags weren't red anymore. They were fire, and I had walked straight into the flames. By morning, I wasn't Evelyn Lakewood anymore. I was a ghost in my own body. I needed answers. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I drove. Daniel had mentioned a downtown hotel once, a discreet place some colleagues used when they needed quiet for meetings. The kind of quiet you don't put on expense reports. I sat in my car across the street for nearly an hour, the steering wheel biting into my palms. And then I saw them. Daniel's car pulled up, Clarissa stepping out in heels I'd never seen her wear. He handed the valet his keys, his hand resting at the small of her back. The same way he used to guide me into restaurants when we were younger. My throat closed. I followed them inside. The lobby smelled of citrus and leather, polished floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. My heels echoed too loudly against the marble as I trailed them at a distance. They didn't look back. Why would they? Betrayal makes you reckless when you think you've already won. At the elevators, Clarissa pressed the button, her laughter bouncing against the walls. She leaned in, whispering something into Daniel's ear, and he kissed her cheek. My husband, kissing her. The doors opened. They stepped inside. and I was left staring at my reflection in the polished metal as the doors slid shut. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears came later, when I slipped out of the hotel unnoticed and drove until the skyline disappeared behind me. Then the sobs tore through me so violently I had to pull over, clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles burned. Grief, betrayal, humiliation, it all clawed at me at once. But underneath it, a darker seed took root. Rage. Because it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a weak moment. It was deliberate, planned, and the cruelest part? They weren't even hiding it well. That photo, that public dinner, that laugh in the lobby. They wanted to be seen, because deep down they thought I was too weak, too naive, too spineless to stop them. Days passed in a blur. Daniel came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. He kissed me on the forehead absent-mindedly, as if I were a child. Clarissa stopped calling as often, but her absence was louder than her presence ever was. I played along, quiet, observant, waiting. The breaking point came one evening when I finally confronted her. Not Daniel, her. We met at her condo, a sterile glass and steel place overlooking the river. She answered the door barefoot, wearing one of his shirts. She didn't even try to hide it. "Evelyn," she said smoothly, leaning on the doorframe like she'd been expecting me. "I wondered when you'd figure it out." Her smugness was gasoline poured on open wounds. "You think this is a game?" I hissed. My voice trembled, but my body shook with fury. She tilted her head, a slow smile spreading. "It's not a game if I've already won." Those words sliced deeper than any blade. She wanted me to know. She wanted me broken. I stepped inside, my chest heaving, my eyes darting to the coffee table where 2 glasses of red wine sat, half empty. My husband's jacket draped across her chair. Proof everywhere, casual, smug. "I gave you everything," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "You were my family." Clarissa's smile widened, sharp as glass. "And now I'm his." I should have screamed. I should have slapped her. Instead, I froze, the betrayal pressing down on me like a weight too heavy to lift. She walked closer, her perfume choking me, her voice low, conspiratorial. "You never knew how to keep him happy, Evelyn. I just showed him what he was missing." That was it. The moment grief burned into rage, the moment pain crystallized into something sharper. Because betrayal like that doesn't just happen. It's engineered. It's savored. I left without another word, my body numb, my mind clear in a way it hadn't been before. As I stepped back into the cold night, her laughter followed me down the hallway. And with every echo, I swore to myself, she would regret every second of smugness. That was the night Evelyn Lakewood died, and the woman who replaced her was already plotting revenge. Weeks blurred into months after the confrontation. At first, I functioned like a ghost, going through motions, answering emails, forcing smiles in public. Behind closed doors, my home felt like a crime scene. Daniel's absence spoke louder than his presence. His ties hung untouched in the closet, his cologne lingered on the sheets. But his heart, if it had ever been mine, was gone. Clarissa didn't just steal him, she flaunted him. Their photos began popping up on social media. Rooftop dinners, charity events, vacations in places Daniel had once promised to take me. The comments beneath the posts were nauseating. Power couple. So perfect together. She liked everyone. And I knew she was watching, waiting for me to react, to collapse publicly so she could savor it. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I went silent. Silence, I discovered, unnerved people more than screams. Silence gave me time to think. And in that quiet, rage sharpened into clarity. Every betrayal leaves 2 choices: collapse or rebuild. And if you rebuild, you choose what shape the new structure takes. I chose steel. At first, the revenge was just a thought, a fantasy I clung to in the dark when grief threatened to drown me. But the more I watched her, the more that fantasy hardened into intent. Clarissa wasn't content with stealing my husband. She wanted my identity, my life, my legacy. She had always envied me. That envy was her weakness. One evening, I sat at my desk staring at a photo of us from years before. Me in a white dress, her in lavender, smiling as my maid of honor. She had been beside me as I promised my life to Daniel. How poetic, I thought, that the same woman who witnessed my vows would become the reason I broke them. But poetry cuts both ways. If she wanted a stolen crown, I would give her one, and then shatter it on her head. The first step wasn't anger. It was patience. I forced myself to play the long game. I kept my circle small, cut contact with mutual friends, and let the gossip swirl unchecked. To the outside world, I was simply moving on quietly. In reality, I was watching. I was learning. Clarissa was careless. Power made her sloppy. She flashed Daniel like a trophy but treated him like furniture. She burned through money on clothes and parties, desperate to be seen as elite. She whispered in the right ears, desperate for social approval. But every time she strutted, she revealed another crack. And I memorized every single one. The turning point came one afternoon in a quiet cafe downtown. I had gone there to escape, to drown in coffee and anonymity. That's when I met him, Nicholas Blackwood, a man who carried himself with the kind of presence that made the air shift when he entered. He was older than Daniel, sharper, with a gaze that sliced through pretense. He asked if he could share my table, and when I looked up, something inside me clicked. It wasn't romance. It wasn't rescue. It was recognition. Nicholas was a man who understood power, how to take it, how to wield it. And in that moment, I realized the shape my revenge would take. We spoke. At first about trivial things, weather, books, the state of the city. But beneath the surface, I studied him, and he studied me. By the end of that hour, I knew two things. Nicholas Blackwood was dangerous, and he could be exactly what I needed. That night, lying awake in my empty bed, I made the decision. I would not heal quietly. I would not forgive. Clarissa had stolen my husband. I would take something from her she could never replace, her status, her pride, her illusion of victory. I would tear it apart, piece by piece, until she was nothing but the shell she deserved to be. For the first time in months, I felt alive. The grief was still there, but it was fuel now, fire that kept me steady. Every photo of her smiling became kindling. Every laugh she shared with Daniel was another spark. And every memory of the woman I used to be, trusting, loyal, blind, was a warning. I would never be her again. The decision wasn't made with tears or theatrics. It was made in silence, in cold blood. And that silence was the loudest vow I had ever taken. From that moment on, every step I took was deliberate. Every word, every glance, every move, calculated. Clarissa thought she had won. Daniel thought I was irrelevant. But I was already building the blueprint of their downfall. I remember standing before the mirror one evening, smoothing my hair, my reflection staring back with eyes I barely recognized. I whispered the words aloud, tasting them like steel on my tongue. You ended my marriage, Clarissa. I'll end your empire. The game had begun. And this time, I wasn't the one who would lose. Revenge is not rage. Rage is messy, loud, sloppy. Revenge is architecture. You build it brick by brick, quiet, deliberate, until the structure towers over your enemy and collapses on their head. That's what I learned from Nicholas. Our meetings began innocently enough. A coffee here, a dinner there. To outsiders, it might have looked like two acquaintances becoming friends. To me, it was reconnaissance. Nicholas wasn't just wealthy, he was connected. His name carried weight in Chicago's business and political circles, the kind of weight Clarissa had been clawing her way toward since the day she stole Daniel. I told him pieces of my story, carefully chosen. I never painted myself as the victim. Instead, I let him see the sharpness, the resolve. Nicholas respected strength, not sympathy. He listened. He asked pointed questions, and slowly, An unspoken alliance formed. "You don't strike me as the type to let betrayal go unanswered," he said once, his voice low over a glass of bourbon. "I don't," I replied. "I just prefer patience." He smiled then, slow and approving. Patience makes the blade sharper. From that moment, we stopped pretending our connection was casual. He knew I wanted revenge. I knew he could help me build it. The first step was information. Clarissa thrived on appearances, and appearances are fragile. I began mapping her life the way an architect sketches blueprints, her routines, her spending, her social calendar, where she shopped, who she lunched with, which board she was desperate to join. Nicholas opened doors I couldn't. Invitations to galas, charity events, dinners where Chicago's elite traded power like currency. I stepped into those rooms on his arm, no longer invisible. And every time I caught Clarissa's name in conversation, I tucked it away like ammunition. She wanted to climb. She wanted to be envied. She wanted to be the woman everyone whispered about. That hunger was her weakness. While Nicholas moved in shadows, I played my role in the light. I rebuilt myself publicly. A new wardrobe, sharper edges, the kind of confidence Clarissa couldn't fake no matter how many designer dresses she bought. I smiled at the right people, volunteered at the right charities, let whispers of Evelyn Lakewood is back spread through the city. All the while, Clarissa didn't see me coming. Why would she? In her mind, I was finished, forgotten. She had won. Daniel was her accessory now, trailing behind her at events like a mannequin. But the cracks were visible if you knew where to look. His laugh sounded strained. His gaze wandered. She tugged at his arm too tightly, smiled too widely, as if trying to convince herself he was still hers. I watched. I waited. I learned. The second step was leverage. Clarissa had always been reckless with money, and marriage hadn't changed that. She burned through Daniel's salary on clothes, vacations, memberships. What she didn't realize was that Nicholas had the kind of influence that could make banks whisper and businesses bend. Through quiet channels, we discovered debts she'd hidden, credit lines stretched thin, favors owed to people with long memories. It wasn't enough to ruin her yet, but it was a fracture in the foundation. The third step was timing. Revenge needs an audience. Clarissa had stolen my husband publicly, parading him around like a prize. So her downfall had to be public too. No quiet scandal, no whispered rumor. It had to be undeniable, visible, humiliating. That's where Nicholas and I became something more than co-conspirators. His world overlapped perfectly with the one Clarissa craved. The fundraisers she begged to attend, he hosted them. The boards she wanted a seat on, he chaired them. The society pages she tried to dominate, he fed them stories. All it took was one subtle move, him inviting me into that world as his partner. Clarissa noticed. I saw it in her eyes the first time we crossed paths at a gala. Her smile faltered, just for a second, when Nicholas placed his hand at the small of my back. She thought it was coincidence. She told herself it was nothing. But deep down, the seed of doubt was planted. That night, Nicholas leaned close and murmured, "She doesn't realize yet, does she?" "No," I whispered back. "But she will." The plan crystallized over the months that followed. Piece by piece, Nicholas and I constructed the stage. He introduced me to allies, people who despised Clarissa's arrogance but had tolerated her because of Daniel's money. I nurtured those connections, planting small truths. How careless she was. How hungry for status. How hollow her marriage looked when no one was watching. I never lied. I didn't need to. People are eager to believe the worst when envy is already in their veins. Clarissa's desperation grew. She pushed harder, spent more, flaunted more. And the more she reached, the easier it became to set the trap. The final step was personal. Revenge isn't just strategy, it's theater. It requires a climax. One evening, Nicholas and I sat overlooking the city lights from his penthouse. He poured me a glass of wine, his eyes sharp as steel. "You've built the structure," he said. Now it's time to let it fall. I nodded. The weight of the plan settled like armor around me. Everything was ready. The timing, the stage, the audience. All that remained was the reveal. Clarissa thought she had stolen my life. What she didn't know was that I had built a new one. Stronger, sharper, untouchable. And when the moment came, I would show her exactly what she had created. Not a victim, but an executioner. As I slipped the ring Nicholas had given me onto my finger, the realization hit with a cold, exhilarating clarity. The trap was complete, and she was already standing in the center of it. The night of the gala shimmered with excess, crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and the low hum of Chicago's wealthiest trading favors under the cover of music and laughter. For most of them, it was another night of handshakes and photos. For me, it was a stage. For Clarissa, it was the end. Nicholas and I arrived deliberately late. It was theater, and timing was everything. The orchestra had already struck its stride. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Heads turned when we entered. His presence drew attention like a magnet, but tonight, the whispers weren't about him. They were about me. Evelyn Lakewood, resurrected, radiant, no longer the discarded wife, but the woman on Nicholas Blackwood's arm. I could feel Clarissa watching before I even saw her. Her gaze burned across the room, brittle and frantic. She was dressed in scarlet, the color of victory. But her smile was stretched too tight, her laugh too sharp. She clung to Daniel like he was proof she had won. But Daniel looked tired. His suit rumpled, his smile absent. The shine of their union had dulled, and I knew the cracks were already spiderwebbing beneath the surface. We crossed paths near the silent auction tables. Clarissa stepped forward, her voice too loud, her tone too sweet. "Evelyn," she said, drawing curious glances from those nearby. "What a surprise." "Clarissa," I replied smoothly, my smile sharp. "You look desperate." Her eyes flickered, a tremor in the mask. She forced a laugh. "Jealousy isn't a good look on you." Nicholas's hand brushed my back as he leaned in just enough for her to hear. "She's not jealous," he said flatly. "She's victorious." The words hung heavy, and Clarissa's composure wavered. People nearby caught it, their eyes narrowing, whispers starting. Exactly as planned. The evening unfolded like choreography. At dinner, Nicholas positioned us at the head table, the one Clarissa had begged weeks for a seat at but been denied. She sat further down, her face tightening with each toast that excluded her. When Nicholas introduced me to the mayor, Clarissa nearly choked on her wine. But the real strike came after dessert, when the auctioneer invited Nicholas to the stage. He spoke briefly, commanding the room, then extended his hand to me. "My wife and I," he said clearly, the word wife slicing the air, "are proud to support tonight's cause." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads swiveled, cameras flashed. And Clarissa went pale. Her fork clattered onto her plate, the sound sharp in the silence. Daniel turned to her, confusion clouding his face. She stammered something, but the words tangled. The room wasn't watching the stage anymore. It was watching her unravel. I stepped forward, my voice carrying, calm and deliberate. "It's funny, isn't it?" I said, addressing no one and everyone. "How betrayal always finds its way back home." The crowd stilled. Conversations froze. Clarissa shook her head, panic sparking in her eyes. "Don't listen to her," she hissed, standing abruptly. But Nicholas had already signaled. A projector flickered to life, filling the screen behind us with images. Clarissa and Daniel, hotels, restaurants, receipts, proof of an affair that began before my marriage had even ended, collected quietly, methodically, and now unveiled in front of Chicago's elite. The room gasped. A low murmur spread like wildfire. Daniel's face crumpled as he realized the evidence wasn't just damning, it was public. Clarissa lunged toward the stage, her voice breaking. "This is lies, all lies." I looked at her coolly, my smile unwavering. No, Clarissa. This is truth. The truth you thought I'd bury. The truth you flaunted because you believed I was too weak to fight back. Laughter rippled from the crowd. Not kind laughter, but the kind that cuts. Eyes turned on her like knives. Sponsors whispered to each other. Board members shook their heads. Journalists scribbled furiously. Her empire was collapsing, brick by brick, and I hadn't even lifted a finger. Daniel stood, his voice trembling. Clarissa, what is this? She reached for him, frantic, desperate. They're lying, Daniel, please. But he pulled away, his face twisted with shame and fury. For years she had used him as her trophy. Tonight, he abandoned her on the battlefield. Nicholas took my hand, raising it slightly, sealing the spectacle. The cameras captured every angle. The powerful man with his elegant wife, the scorned friend humiliated in front of the very world she tried to dominate. Clarissa's voice cracked, her scream echoing through the hall. You think this makes you better than me? I stepped down from the stage, stopping inches from her, my voice low but carrying. No, Clarissa. This makes me finished with you. Her knees buckled and she collapsed into her chair, shaking. No one moved to comfort her. Not Daniel, not her so-called friends. She was alone, exposed, devoured by the silence of a crowd that had already judged her guilty. The orchestra struck up again, filling the space with music. But the night was over for her. She fled moments later, heels clicking against the marble like gunshots, her face ashen, her world in ruins. I remained, smiling, toasting with Nicholas as if nothing had happened. Because for me, it wasn't destruction. It was justice. And for Clarissa, there was no coming back. The morning after the gala, Chicago buzzed. The papers didn't call her by name, not yet, but everyone knew. A prominent socialite exposed for a scandalous affair. The gossip columns devoured every detail, from the photos on the projector to the look on Daniel's face as he walked out alone. The whispers spread faster than fire, and by the time noon arrived, Clarissa's phone was poison. Invitations revoked, messages unanswered. Her so-called friends deleting photos where she once tagged along like an accessory. She had wanted to be envied. Now she was infamous. I didn't bother checking on Daniel. He was collateral damage, nothing more. He hadn't fought for me, hadn't even seen me in the months leading to the betrayal. He'd become a ghost before Clarissa ever touched him. Let him drown in the silence she left behind. But Clarissa was different. She wasn't just a thief. She was a conqueror who thought she could walk away victorious. And conquerors don't crumble quietly. They claw, they beg, they scheme. That was what I was counting on. 2 weeks later, she appeared at Nicholas's office unannounced. I watched from behind tinted glass as she argued with the receptionist, her voice shrill, her hands trembling. She wore sunglasses to hide the dark circles under her eyes, but nothing could disguise the desperation. Nicholas let her in. He always did enjoy the theater. I stood in the corner of his office as she stormed inside, ripping the glasses from her face. Her lipstick was smeared, her hair unkempt. Clarissa Hale, the woman who once dripped with poise, reduced to a frantic shadow. You planned this, she spat, her finger jabbing toward me, then Nicholas. The gala, the photos, all of it. You humiliated me. I didn't flinch. You humiliated yourself. She shook her head violently. No, you don't have that kind of power, Evelyn. You never did. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, his expression unreadable. You're right, he said coolly. She didn't. Not alone. Clarissa froze. Her gaze snapped to him. What? His smile was slow, deliberate, cruel. Do you really think Evelyn met me by accident? Do you think I marry without knowing exactly what I'm investing in? You weren't just her betrayal. You were a liability, and I don't do business with liabilities. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The realization dawned in her eyes like a sunrise she couldn't stop. You knew, she whispered. From the beginning. Nicholas nodded once. Before the beginning. You weren't as clever as you thought, Clarissa. The moment you reached beyond your place, you were marked. Evelyn simply delivered the strike. I stepped forward, my heels sharp against the marble floor, stopping inches from her. You wanted to be me so badly, I said softly, and now you are. Discarded, forgotten, a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties. Her breath came shallow, her shoulders slumping under the weight of inevitability. You'll regret this, she tried, but even her voice lacked conviction. No, I said, my tone cold, final. The only thing I regret is not watching you fall sooner. Her eyes brimmed with tears she refused to let fall. She turned to Nicholas, one last desperate attempt. You can't really be with her. Not after everything. Nicholas's voice was ice. I don't stand beside women who destroy. I stand beside women who build. Evelyn built this. You destroyed yourself. The silence that followed was her execution. No one shouted. No one struck. The verdict had already been delivered at the gala. And this was the final nail. Clarissa Hale, once my best friend, once my betrayer, was nothing more than rubble in the city she tried to conquer. She stumbled out, sunglasses clutched in her hand, her heels clicking unevenly down the hall. She didn't look back. She knew better. Nicholas rose and walked to my side, his hand brushing against mine. Satisfied? He asked. I looked out the window, the city stretching below, vibrant and alive. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not satisfied, I said. Finished. He kissed the side of my temple, and together we watched the skyline, knowing the world had shifted in our favor. Clarissa thought she'd stolen my life. What she never realized was that she was just a stepping stone to the one I was destined for. And as Chicago forgot her name, I etched mine deeper than ever into its walls. Because betrayal doesn't end with forgiveness. It ends with victory. Thank you for staying until the very end of my story. Betrayal leaves scars, but sometimes it also delivers the sharpest justice. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever seen someone get exactly what they deserved? Share your experience in the comments below. I read everyone. And if this tale kept you on the edge, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. It lets me know you want more stories like this. Until next time, remember, revenge served cold always tastes the sweetest.